In a poor slum in New Orleans, where the alleys are filled with the scent of jazz music and the misty dampness from the Mississippi River, there lived a boy named Eli. Orphaned at a young age, Eli grew up in poverty, with days of plenty and days of hunger. However, from one day onward, something strange began to happen. Every morning at the windowsill, Eli would find a neatly wrapped bundle of food in an old cloth. Sometimes it was hot cornbread, sometimes it was the fragrant gumbo soup, and other times it was a warm slice of apple pie. He was extremely curious. Who was helping him? And why were they hiding their identity? Eli had once stayed up all night to catch the culprit, but strangely, he always fell asleep just before dawn, and every time he woke up, the food was there. His neighbors, busy with their own struggles, paid no attention to the orphan child. Only Mrs. Hattie, the elderly black woman with silver hair, would often chat with Eli. She would sit on her porch with her old banjo, her hoarse voice saying, "Son, life is like a pot of gumbo, spicy hot, but if you're patient enough to stir, you'll taste the sweetness." One day, Eli received the usual food bundle, but this time, there was a small key with it. No. Curious, he kept the key with him. But the next morning, no food appeared. Day after day, he felt empty and lost. Then life swept Eli along. He grew up, working various jobs to survive, from washing dishes to being a kitchen assistant in high-end restaurants. But in his heart, he always harbored one dream: to become a chef and open his own restaurant. Many years later, Eli had become a renowned chef, hailed by the press as the culinary wizard of New Orleans for his rich dishes, steeped in love. At the grand opening of his new restaurant, Eli decided to name it the Invisible Meal, in honor of his mysterious benefactor. Guests would ask, "What's the secret behind your dishes always warming the heart?" Eli would just smile. "It's a flavor I once received but never saw." One rainy night, while cleaning up the old storage room he had rented from a former grocery store, Eli accidentally discovered a dusty wooden box. His heart fluttered. The lock on the box fit perfectly with the old key he had kept all these years. He opened the box. Inside were scraps of recipes and an old, faded letter. "Dear little Eli, the best dishes are the ones cooked with the heart. Keep that fire within you. Love, Hattie." Along with the letter was an old photograph. Mrs. Hattie, younger, standing in a kitchen surrounded by the dishes Eli had received throughout his childhood. Eli went back to the old neighborhood, but the place was now an empty lot. An elderly neighbor recognized him and softly said, "You're the boy from back then, right? Mrs. Hattie passed away long ago, but before she left, she asked us to leave this box in the old storage room. She said, one day, you would understand everything." At that moment, Eli remembered the days when Mrs. Hattie would say, "I'm going out for a while," were the days the food stopped appearing. And the box was the final legacy she left for him. Eli stood still in the rain. The scent of gumbo from his past seemed to linger in the air. He whispered softly, "Thank you, my first teacher." From that day on, in the menu of his restaurant, The Invisible Meal, Eli added a special dish, Mrs. Hattie's gumbo, free for every poor child. When someone asked why, Eli would just smile. "Because the best dish is the one we've received with all our heart." From that rainy night, Eli's life took a new turn. The Invisible Meal became a culinary phenomenon in New Orleans, not only for its exquisite dishes, but also for the touching story behind it. However, amid his success, Eli always felt a void, a sense that something was still incomplete, urging him to search for what was missing. One evening, while Eli was busy in the kitchen, a stranger entered. He looked rugged, with graying hair and deep, sad blue eyes. What caught Eli's attention was the old banjo he was carrying, exactly like the one Mrs. Hattie used to play. The man ordered Mrs. Hattie's gumbo and quietly enjoyed his meal. When Eli came to check on him, the man just smiled and, with a gravelly voice, said, "This gumbo reminds me of an old friend." Curious, Eli asked about the friend, but the man shook his head, saying it was a long story, and asked to be left alone to eat. Before leaving, he left behind an old business card. "J. Moreau, un Banjo musicien." That night, Eli tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The banjo, the sad eyes, the name J. Moreau haunted his mind. The next morning, Eli searched for information about J. Moreau. To his surprise, J. Moreau was a famous banjo musician who had performed with Mrs. Hattie at the old jazz bar in the French Quarter. Eli went to the old bar in the French Quarter where J. Moreau used to perform. The bar still had a nostalgic feel, with the sounds of jazz softly echoing. Eli asked the bar owner about Jay, Moreau, and Mrs. Hattie. The owner, a middle-aged man with a buzz cut, frowned. Jay, Moreau, Hattie? I haven't heard those names in a long time. They were talented artists, but their story is a sad one. He told Eli that Jay, Moreau, and Mrs. Hattie had once been a famous artistic duo, their music stirring the hearts of many. But then, a major event happened, causing them to part ways and disappear from the art world. The bar owner had only heard rumors about a dark secret and a blood debt connected to them. Returning to the restaurant, Eli opened Mrs. Hattie's box again, hoping to find more clues. He searched more thoroughly and, unexpectedly, discovered a hidden compartment at the bottom of the box. Inside was a second letter, written on a different type of paper, the ink smeared from moisture. The letter read, Eli, my dear son, if you are reading this, perhaps everything has gone too far. I'm sorry for not telling you the truth sooner. But this secret, it's too dangerous. It could ruin your life. Jay Moreau, stay away from that man. He is not who you think he is. He is connected to my painful past, and he could bring disaster upon you. Don't trust anyone, Eli. Trust your heart, and protect yourself. Forever loving you, Mother. The second letter left Eli stunned. Mrs. Hattie was not only his benefactor, but also his biological mother, and Jay Moreau, the mysterious banjo musician, was a dangerous figure connected to her dark past. His mother's warning left Eli confused and fearful. Why did she tell him to stay away from Jay Moreau? What was her past? And what dark secret was threatening his life? Despite the warning, Eli could not contain his curiosity. He decided to meet Jay Moreau to uncover the truth. Eli went to the address on the business card, which turned out to be a small, shabby apartment on the outskirts of the city. Jay Moreau welcomed Eli warmly, but his eyes still carried a sad, mysterious look. He invited Eli in, poured tea, and began to tell the story of his past with Mrs. Hattie. According to Jay Moreau, he and Mrs. Hattie had been kindred spirits, soulmates in music. They shared their passions, dreams, and beautiful memories together. But then, Mrs. Hattie got caught up in a dark force, a dangerous criminal organization, and had to distance herself from Jay Moreau to protect him. Jay Moreau believed that Mrs. Hattie had sacrificed herself to save him, and he had always lived with guilt and regret. Jay Moreau also revealed that Mrs. Hattie had always felt guilty about the son she had left behind. She had quietly kept an eye on Eli from afar, sending the food bundles as a way to make amends and protect her son. He confirmed that Mrs. Hattie had loved Eli deeply and had always wished for him to have a good life. Jay Moreau's story sounded reasonable and moving, but Eli still had doubts. There was something wrong, details that contradicted his mother's letter. Eli decided to verify Jay Moreau's story. He went to Mrs. Hattie's old friends, jazz musicians from her time, and inquired about her past with Jay Moreau. Slowly, the horrifying truth began to emerge, completely opposite to Jay Moreau's account. The truth was that Jay Moreau was not Mrs. Hattie's soulmate, but rather her enemy. He was a brutal, jealous man, possessive and controlling. He exploited Mrs. Hattie's talent and kindness, turning her into a tool for his illegal activities. It was Jay Moreau who pushed Mrs. Hattie into a life of crime, causing the incident that forced her to leave everything behind. One of Mrs. Hattie's old friends even revealed that Jay Moreau was involved in the death of Eli's father. Eli's father had discovered Jay Moreau's illegal activities and planned to expose him, but was brutally murdered by Jay Moreau. Mrs. Hattie had learned the truth and vowed to avenge her husband, while also protecting her son from Jay Moreau's pursuit. The truth hit Eli like a lightning bolt, leaving him stunned. The man he had once trusted, the one he thought was his mother's friend, was actually the enemy who killed his father and destroyed his mother's life. A raging fury burned inside Eli. He decided to confront Jay Moreau, expose his true nature, and seek justice for his parents. Eli went to Jay Moreau's apartment once again, this time not out of curiosity, but out of anger and determination. The confrontation between Eli and Jay Moreau was intense, suffocating. Jay Moreau no longer kept up his gentle, polite demeanor. He revealed his true, vicious nature and admitted to all his crimes. Jay Moreau revealed that he knew Eli was Mrs. Hattie's son, and he had approached Eli to manipulate him and uncover the secret of the treasure Mrs. Hattie had hidden before her death. He believed Mrs. Hattie had left a clue about the treasure for Eli, and he wanted to seize it in order to take revenge on her and her family. The final battle between Eli and Jay Moreau took place at the very restaurant Invisible Meal. Jay Moreau and his henchmen attacked the restaurant with the intention of kidnapping Eli and seizing everything. But Eli was not alone. Friends, colleagues, and even kind neighbors stood by his side, fighting against the dark forces. In this life-and-death battle, Eli used all his skills, intelligence, and courage. He fought not only to protect himself and the restaurant, but also to defend his parents' honor, seek justice, and close the painful chapter of the past. With perseverance and unity, Eli and his friends defeated Jay Moreau and his gang. Jay Moreau was arrested and had to pay for his crimes. The dark secrets of Eli's family's past were finally exposed, and the truth triumphed over the darkness. After the battle with Jay Moreau, Eli's life gradually returned to a normal rhythm, but in his heart, there were still wounds that hadn't healed. Invisible Meal became more popular, and Eli's reputation spread far and wide. Yet, amidst all the hustle and bustle, he still felt a sense of loneliness. One rainy evening, a young woman walked into the restaurant. She had jet black hair, porcelain skin, and sapphire blue eyes that sparkled like the surface of a fall lake. The woman introduced herself as Vivian Dubois, a freelance journalist who had come to New Orleans to write about new culinary talents. Vivian ordered Mrs. Hattie's Gumbo and watched Eli work in the kitchen with keen interest. When Eli brought the dish to her, their eyes met, and a spark seemed to pass through the air. From that fateful encounter, Vivian frequently visited the Invisible Meal. She was not only a loyal patron, but also became Eli's confidant. Vivian was captivated by Eli's stories, about his life, about Grandma Hattie, and about the mysteries and hardships he had endured. Between them blossomed a deep empathy, a gentle yet enchanting bond. However, alongside their budding romance, strange occurrences began to resurface. The old banjo that had belonged to Grandma Hattie, which Eli had placed in a place of honor within the restaurant, suddenly began to emit eerie sounds at night. Sometimes it was a mournful, ringing banjo melody. Other times it was harsh, jarring noises like the clash of metal. At first, Eli thought it was a mere coincidence, or perhaps the damp weather causing the instrument to warp. But the strange sounds grew more frequent and distinct, as if an unseen force was trying to communicate with him. One night, Eli had a peculiar dream. In it, he found himself standing on the porch of an old house in the slums, the place where he once received mysterious food packages. Grandma Hattie appeared, not as the gentle, silver-haired old woman he knew, but as a beautiful young woman in a pristine white dress. She held the banjo and plucked a tender, melancholic melody that overflowed with sorrow. She gazed at Eli with eyes full of love and concern, then softly said, "My boy, be careful. The ghosts of the past have not yet let us go. Listen to the banjo. It will guide your path." Eli awoke, his forehead drenched in sweat. The dream had been so vivid, so real, that he couldn't shake it from his mind. He recalled Grandma Hattie's words from the dream. "Listen to the banjo. It will guide your path." Could the strange banjo sounds at night be more than mere coincidence? Were they a sign, a message from beyond? Determined to uncover the truth, Eli decided to learn more about Grandma Hattie's old banjo. He brought the instrument to a renowned luthier in the French Quarter, hoping to unravel its mystery. The luthier examined the banjo meticulously, then spoke in a low, contemplative voice. "This is a vintage banjo, crafted from rare, precious wood. But its true uniqueness lies not in its material, but in its soul. I can sense an unusual energy within it, as if it holds a secret, a story yet to be told." Following the luthier's suggestion, Eli began researching the banjo's history. He scoured libraries, searched online archives, and consulted experts in antique instruments. Finally, he stumbled upon a startling discovery. Grandma Hattie's banjo was no ordinary instrument. It was an heirloom, an artifact linked to an old legend about a hidden treasure in New Orleans. The legend spoke of an infamous French pirate from the 18th century who, before his capture and execution, buried a vast treasure somewhere in New Orleans. The pirate was said to have engraved a treasure map onto a special banjo, an instrument passed down through generations within a mysterious noble family. And as it turned out, Grandma Hattie was a descendant of that noble lineage. The old banjo in Eli's possession was, in fact, the key to unlocking the long-lost treasure. However, the legend also warned that the treasure was not only a source of wealth, but also harbored an ancient curse. Anyone who sought the treasure with greed and malicious intent would face terrible consequences. Could it be that Jay Moreau knew about this treasure legend, and that was why he was relentlessly pursuing Grandma Hattie and Eli's family? As Eli struggled with the unraveling mysteries, Vivian appeared like a beacon of hope. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She was also a trustworthy ally. As a journalist, Vivian possessed exceptional investigative skills and an ability to analyze information. She decided to help Eli decode the mystery surrounding the banjo and the family treasure. Vivian and Eli embarked on a journey to uncover the truth hidden within New Orleans, following the clues of the treasure legend. They visited historic sites, ancient libraries, and old neighborhoods, collecting small but crucial pieces of the puzzle. During their investigation, they gradually discovered that Jay Moreau was not acting alone. He was connected to a secret organization, an ominous force plotting to seize the treasure and exploit its supernatural power for dark and nefarious purposes. The treasure hunt led Eli and Vivian to an ancient cemetery deep within a desolate swamp. This place was rumored to be the burial site of the pirate and the hiding place of the legendary treasure. When Eli touched the old banjo in the cemetery, a supernatural force suddenly awakened. The banjo emitted a blinding light, and eerie melodies echoed throughout the space. The ghost of the pirate materialized, threatening Eli and Vivian, warning them not to disturb the treasure. Suddenly, Jay Moreau and his henchmen appeared, surrounding Eli and Vivian. He revealed that he had known about the treasure for a long time and had used Eli to lead him to it. Jay Moreau sought to claim the treasure and its supernatural power to dominate the underworld. The final battle between Eli, Vivian, and Jay Moreau took place in the eerie cemetery, among the ancient graves, with the supernatural power rising around them. Eli gripped the banjo tightly, feeling a mystical connection to Grandma Hattie and the latent power within the instrument. He closed his eyes, surrendering his soul to the music, his skilled fingers gliding across the strings, creating melodies that were both tragic and melodic, strong and gentle. Eli's music was not just a series of notes. It was his soul, a prayer, a spiritual force passed down from Grandma Hattie. The sound of the banjo resonated throughout the cemetery, dispelling the darkness, pushing back the evil energy of the pirate's ghost. The loving melodies and the light from the banjo gradually overcame the curse, causing the pirate's ghost to scream in agony before vanishing into the void. Jay Moreau and his henchmen were horrified by Eli's supernatural power, and in their panic, they fled. In a desperate attempt, Jay Moreau charged at Eli to snatch the banjo, but Vivian quickly intervened. She delivered a decisive blow, disarming Jay Moreau and sending him crashing to the ground. The battle was over, the darkness faded, and the dawn appeared, dispelling the eerie and sorrowful atmosphere of the cemetery. Eli and Vivian, both exhausted yet filled with joy and happiness, embraced each other in the peaceful space, bathed in radiant light. Returning from the brink of life and death, Eli and Vivian were married in a warm and joyful ceremony, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and beloved neighbors offering their blessings. The Invisible Meal restaurant became their home, a place where love and happiness always flourished. Eli, now not only a talented chef, but also the keeper of the values Grandma Hattie had passed down, created dishes that were infused with love, gratitude, and all the experiences he had endured. The dish, Grandma Hattie's Gumbo, remained the most special on the menu, always offered for free to poor children. Vivian continued to write touching stories, bringing tales of perseverance, love, and hope to the world, shining light into the darkness, just as they had done.